Hello, everyone, and welcome to Birth and Baby Talk. I'm Leanne Palmerston, and that's me. Welcome, Aimee.
Hi, thank you.
You're welcome. This week, we're going to be talking about being doulas. So a little bit about what it's like from our perspective. And Aimee brought this great topic to me, and I thought, oh my gosh, this would be a fantastic thing to talk about. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. We had a nice little chat about a bunch of different things, but I think we'll get into even a little bit more today, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I'm assuming, oh, my phone is going up. So, oh my Lord, I'm turning that off.
It's so popular.
I know, I'm very popular. I just like to keep an eye on things because I am on call.
You are on call.
Yes. And that is kind of, we're going to be talking mostly from a perspective of a birth doula today. We've done a show in the past about postpartum doulas and overnight postpartum doulas. And today we're going to focus in on the being a birth doula. And I'm on call for a number of folks and have been chatting with people, supporting them on my little phone all morning.
Now, let's start here because this is a spot where a lot of people, like a lot of clients or people that I chat with at parties about what I do, they're a little bit mystified as to like, okay, so if you have more than one client, how do you manage that? Like, and what if they go into labor at the same time? What do you do?
Well, of course, as you know, there's a couple of different ways to handle that. So most folks don't necessarily realize, I think the majority of doulas practicing are usually in solo practice, and they often have maybe a dedicated backup person or a couple of doulas that they work in companionship with, like a little bit of if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of situation, or a mutual sharing of funds. So sometimes we pay a backup, and sometimes we have a mutual agreement that if that you'll get paid for the birth if you have to attend the birth, and the same thing if I have to attend a birth for your client. But otherwise, it's like a professional courtesy sometimes between doulas who work together closely.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And then some people actually pay for another doula to be on call. That's not how I do it personally, but there are all different kinds of ways to manage that. And the one thing that one way that I try to explain it to people is that it is about how different it is I haven't been able to think of any other profession where you need to be so available to your colleagues and so-called competition, right? Like you have to be available to them. Otherwise, you're going to get left in the lurch, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we do it at our agency. We have two ways of doing things. So if you're a returning client, then you can have the doula who was at your birth previously be your primary doula, and she handles most of things. But then we always work in teams of two. So we have a second doula on the team who then also provides lots of support. And in the event that two people go into birth at the same time, the other doula can step in if needed.
Yeah. That's exactly how we did it in my partnership back in Vancouver. My partners were absolutely amazing. Tip of the hat to Alexandra, Jasmine, and to Natalie.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I have a new doula partner on my team, a lovely lady named Ivy, who shares call with me. So for the majority of our clients, Ivy and I sort of split call. So Ivy this morning at about 10 o'clock, Ivy went off call and I go on call. So I'm presently on call for all of our clients because you never know, like we might have clients who are due in early October who could technically have their babies now very early, and it would be very unexpected. Like it's incredibly rare that happens, but we are on call for them should they need us. And then next week on Wednesday, I'll go off call and Ivy will come back on call. So I'm fully expecting to go to at least one birth this week. And if I'm at that birth, also my doula partner will go on call while I'm at that birth And while I'm recovering from the birth, like giving me a good 12 to 24 hours after that baby arrives so I can get some good napping and feeding myself in and taking care of myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that is like, that kind of leads us into like an idea about sustainability.
Self-care. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that's why, I know, as you said, most doulas are solo practitioners, and it's doable. I did it for, I think, 8 years. And then after that 8 years, I finally went on vacation once after getting a doula partner.
Yeah.
No, that's not true. I was still solo, but I talked to my clients. There was a little bit of a gap, and I went on vacation. The vacation was supposed to be for, I think, 5 days around my birthday. I ended up going back like 3 days early, unfortunately. Yeah, someone did go into labor, right? So anyway, the moment that we got there, I didn't unpack anything. It was a tenting deal. There was a little lawn area. We were the only people there. And I just laid myself out on the lawn and slept. I don't know how long I slept for, but after 8 years of being on call, to suddenly be off call was amazing. It was amazing. And it made me realize that I really needed to do something to make it more sustainable for myself, because I hadn't realized how exhausted I really was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really recommend, for those who are solo or just starting and thinking, should I go solo? Should I get a partner? I really recommend looking into the partner option. It can be challenging to find someone that you really mesh with, so that your clients are getting, a similar experience no matter who shows up, right? That can be challenging, but it's worth the search, I'd say.
I think so too. Like, I spent the first, say, 4 years of my practice being solo, and I did technically, I guess I did for the last 2 years have a backup arrangement, and I was called into one of their births. And I have to tell you, while that arrangement provides a safety net for everybody, right? And there are some inherent problems with it. So when you are the doula who is backing someone else up, but you've never really had a chance to establish much of a relationship, like I did. So I was back up for 2 births. The first of birth, I came in and hung out during a prenatal. So I did sort of hang out with them and spend a little time with them, but I didn't really do a lot of talking because the other doula ran that meeting. And so my relationship with that couple was very limited. Now they had their baby with their doula. And then like 3 years later, or 2 years later, the doula called and said, that couple is having another baby. Would you back them up as well? And I said, no problem. Turns out I was called to that birth. And because I had never, like, I didn't even meet them during that second pregnancy. So when I went to work with them, I didn't have any insight into what the birthing person's sort of personality was, what her hopes and dreams, like her deep hopes and dreams are, which is something I'm really closely attuned to when I'm meeting with a couple. Lots of different kinds of chat that we have, like joking around chats, talks about fear, talks about straight up birth plan,
values, what their values in life and in their expectation for parenting or their hopes for parenting. Yeah.
And so I found myself like really feeling incredibly ineffective. The couple,
it's difficult.
Yeah, the couple didn't love it either. They had a difficult experience, and it felt very easy for them to say, well, the doula was super ineffective. That's why we had such a terrible experience overall with their birth. And, that really hurt me. But I also know, like, oh, it's because I didn't have a close relationship. So right after that birth, actually kind of shook me a little bit. And I thought, maybe I'm not cut out for this work. Like, maybe it's too much for me. Maybe I'm not as good as I think. Because the couple said, like, I wasn't able to make a connection with them. Well, yes, because I met you while you were in deep stress. And it's not easy to get to know someone and understand what they need from you when they're completely stressed out.
And it depends on the couple too. Like some couples, honestly, I find most couples, it is possible to make that connection, even if you're coming in cold, so to speak.
Yeah.
But if you have a couple where there is maybe not an easy connection for them and for you, coming in cold like that, that's when it becomes difficult, right?
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And under that much stress, sometimes it's hard for other people to accept someone new into a situation.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because then you feel like it's easy to feel like maybe they're contributing to the stress, right?
Yeah.
Like effort to get to know someone or be around a new person you don't know very well can contribute to that stress. So of course there was a lot of things going on, and I'm not saying anything bad about this couple.
No, of course not. And it's always a thing about people coming together, right? It's not one party or the other being.
Exactly. They had specific needs. They had a vision of how they wanted things to go. It wasn't quite going that way. I did my best to help them, but sometimes, like as doulas, we can do everything right and none of it kind of lands well with a particular client, or the particular client is in a different experience. They're having a really different reality. And so this kind of shook me, and I thought maybe I don't want to do this. And I talked with another doula, and she was saying that she was struggling with a few things like accountability, making sure she always visited with her clients in the postpartum period, or making sure she was always as emotionally available to them when they needed her. And we decided to go into partnership, and it changed the game for me. And one of the other things that we did was, besides sharing how we cared for a client, we shared the money, right? So that's the other thing about sustainability is, in birth work, it's sometimes an all or nothing deal, right? If you don't have any birth clients, you're not making any money. And if you're going to births, then you are making some money. And obviously this is a job. Like, I would, be amazing to work in a world where everyone who did things that helped other people, doctors and surgeons and dentists and every, doulas and everything, massage therapists, we all didn't have to charge money.
Wouldn't it be wonderful? I fantasize about that all the time. Like how nice it would be if I could just, get my living paid for by the state, I guess, and just do exactly the number of births that's right for me and really give such good attention. And then I could be giving to whoever really needs, right? Like, because you have to make a living, you can't always just give to the person who's needing it most, right?
Absolutely. So it's hard. Like, it's hard to eke out a living with this work, because you can't go to so many births, because that impedes your ability to go to your clients' births. Eventually you'll hit a point where everyone's just having babies.
What's your sweet spot? Yeah, what's your sweet spot?
I don't know that. I mean, I think 3 or 4 births a month is kind of my sweet spot.
That's my sweet spot too.
With shared care. So I think with shared care, I could go up to maybe 6 to 8 births a month.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, same with me. But I try to stick to 6, but if it...
I start to get nervous, though, when I think, oh my gosh, what if 3 people go into birth at the exact same time?
That's the thing. With 2, we'd really tried to keep it to 6. Like when we were in partnership, we tried to keep it to 6 because of that very factor, right? If it's not the same as having 3, and the risk is, it's just different odds, right? So.
Yeah, for sure. And then when we heard about a couple of different models for arranging shared care, that completely revolutionized our agency. So when we went into like straight up split shared care, instead of having a primary and a secondary, instead of having that one dedicated doula who was definitely going to your birth, you could have either of the doulas.
That's right.
And so we just structured everything so that everyone could get to know us as equally as possible, so that
all the doulas get to have time off. And this is, the other part of that is, the reality of it is, even when you've got your off week,
you're
still somewhat on, right? Like you're never 100% off, but at least it brings the, the on-call stress down.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things that people don't realize is that being on call is incredibly stressful. I mean, some people might think, oh, how hard is that? You just get to like hang around all the time. And then one day out of a month, like, because a client can only have a baby on one, like one time, right?
That's not true even though. I mean, think about the times that you've been called and attended because you're really needed. But then, the baby wasn't born until a week later or 2 weeks later.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I've ever actually had that situation. Yeah, I don't think I've
had it a few times. And though, I mean, those were situations where, usually a first timer, really intense pre-labor. And I usually know on the phone, right? Like I can hear what's going on and I know that it's probably pre-labor, but the couple is nervous, right? And it's not helping just to chat on the phone with them about what's going on, and I have to go attend to them. But yeah,
I think maybe our clientele just feels like when we have clientele who are nervous like that, and maybe it's the fact that where we live is very, very well saturated with hospitals and midwives and doctors and things, that people have a tendency to want to verify with their care provider. So they will happily hop over to the hospital and get checked.
Yeah.
And then someone will say, well, you're not really, really in labor. And here, maybe take some Gravol and Tylenol and go to sleep and you'll feel better. And things will either peter out or they'll really get going. But I find that our clients have a tendency to call us a little bit later into the process, although we've got lots of false positives. So, a couple of weeks ago, we had a client who was like, hey, just giving you a heads up. We are driving home from the cottage. I think they were 3 weeks before their due date. They said, we're driving home from the cottage. It's an hour till we get back to Hamilton. The midwife is going to come to our house and give me a check because I think I'm in early labor. I was like, so the whole time I was like, okay, I'm going to have a nap. I'm going to just make sure that I have like a little uniform.
Your kit.
Yeah, like my kit is ready to go. I got a clean mask in there for getting to the hospital and stuff. And and then she was like, the next morning, I think she finally messaged and was like, we got home, everything was fine, labor petered out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
No biggie. But again, that's like, these are examples of how it's not just the moment of labor, right? There's all kinds of things that are involved. And there's even just, your weekly check-in with that client and what that brings up in terms of follow-up that you need to do, maybe with your backup doulas. And there's all kinds of things going on. And just the fact of waiting for that call, right? Like that's something in and of itself.
I have something to confess to you, Aimee.
What's your confession?
Waiting for the call. Waiting for the call. That's my least favorite thing about the work that I do. Yeah. Now, it's this weird thing. It's like the anticipation, and I think it's a purely chemical thing, right? The anticipation of waiting to get the call means I'm sitting around waiting for an adrenaline spike to hit me. And I know what an adrenaline spike feels like when it hits me, right? So if a phone rings anytime after 9 p.m., it's almost always a client. Rarely is someone in my family or a friend giving me a call. And the only times anyone calls after like 9 or 10 at night is when there's bad news or a baby. So anytime the phone does ring late, my heart starts to go like, oh, what's happening? What's going on? Is something happening? Like, am I going to a birth? And I get this huge adrenaline spike. And, like when you get those adrenaline rushes, like, it just feels like for a moment, like you're about to have a heart attack, like your whole heart sort of filling, your blood's pumping. You have this feeling of fullness and a bit of fright in your chest, you know, and then it recedes and you're okay. And now that adrenaline rush, like, that gives me good things. It allows me to be alert and awake and energetic for my clients, no matter what time of night or day that they call me. So if they're calling me at 4 a.m. and wake me from a dead sleep, I might be disoriented for 5 or 10 minutes, but then I am good to go for the rest of the day. Yeah. However, knowing that I'm going to have that feeling, and I could have it at any time of night or day, any day of the week, that's the part that's really hard. And I think for a little bit, like, that is kind of my most dreaded thing about our work. But then the minute I'm in a space with my clients, when I get to their home or I meet them, my heart opens up.
Just everything disappears. Exactly. Everything. Yeah.
I'm in my element. I feel great. I feel confident and natural.
Yeah, I hear you totally. Now, my difficult moment is slightly different from yours. Okay. I don't have the, I mean, I know there's a low level anticipation for sure, but it's not the same kind of experience that you're talking about. The moment that I do get the call and I know that I'm going, from that moment until the moment that I'm in the car heading there, that's my stressful time.
Wow.
I feel quite stressed out in that time. And I think it's partly because typically I find it difficult to get everything together and get out of the house. So I find that part very, very stressful for me. Once I'm in the car and I'm thinking about my client, and then of course, once I actually get there, it's good. When I'm in the car, I'm just kind of like, okay, I still feel that adrenaline surge at that point. And it provides that clarity and that alertness. And I'm thinking about, okay, what do I need to bring to this birth? What parts of myself do I need to bring to this birth? So it's more at that point, an anticipatory and kind of excited planning. And then the moment I step through the door, it's just like focused and present. And it's such a wonderful thing because it's almost like what you're trying to attain when you're meditating, I find, you know, because you are so present in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. And I feel like I can make a real difference in people's lives, you know, because the flip side of that is my favorite thing is to help people understand what's going on and help them feel more centered. I can always achieve that. But I feel good when I can get someone, you know, if they're at 10 on the reaction scale, 1 to 10, and I can bring them down even to like a 7, 8 zone, then I know that I'm having a good effect on them and I'm helping them have a better experience. Because I think, I don't know, maybe it's understanding what it's like to feel something really deeply triggering or traumatizing, and then like, so knowing how that feels inside my body and inside my heart and my mind and the effects that can have long term, and then walking into a space where I know I can bring down that sort of potential for trauma, like bring that down, that is very gratifying. But I also feel like that's kind of like what I do. Like, that's just what I do.
That's the job.
And I feel sometimes when trying to explain that to clients, it's not as easy to, like, they're looking for, generally they're like, oh, I want to have a non-medicated birth. So I want to have a doula who will help me achieve the non-medicated birth. Or I'm trying to avoid medication. So like, they're kind of like the same coin, but slightly different points. And I think people are always thinking in terms of that, or they want like someone there to be a buffer between, you know, medical staff that they feel like, I don't know who they are. I don't know if I can trust them. I've read all these crazy things on the internet and like all of these sort of very strong voiced natural birth proponents can create a kind of this weird distrust haze around medical stuff. So I think a lot of people are like heading into their births feeling like a great sense of unease. Like, my gosh, not only do I not know what's about to happen to me personally, but also there's all these like wild cards in the nurse or my midwife or the doctor or whatever's going on. And I really like to try to take that out of the equation as much as possible. But like, so they're looking for that when they talk to me about like looking to hire a doula. But then I'm trying to tell them about, well, I'm here to reduce your stress. Like, ultimately, that's what I do. I do that through like a lot of different ways, but ultimately my job is to reduce that stress for you. So even if you do require these like big, scary medical things, like maybe your baby is never going to be able to come out of your body one way just because they've gone and danced themselves up in their umbilical cord and there's just no slack for them to emerge. Right? It's not something we can know until we try to see if that baby can be born. So if a birth ends up turning into a C-section, you can sort of rejoice and have like a really happy feeling about all of that stuff, about participating in that change of plan.
Yeah. I always walk
the stress, right?
I always walk my clients, whatever, the stronger they're feeling one way or another, the more I work with them to walk through alternate scenarios, what ifs, because there needs to be a coping mindset developed no matter which way things go for them. And I have just got so much feedback from clients when things did go a different way of thanks for taking them through that process, because they say, I know it would have been fine. It would have been okay. But it would have been harder. It would have been a lot harder had I not taken the time to envision that, how I would cope, what I can do to keep myself calm and centered and make it mine, right? Yeah. Like whatever happens, that it is my experience. So,
yeah, I think that could possibly be the most important message we could, if there was something we could tell people. Like, people are always saying, like, what can I do to prepare for a better birth? And I think, like, honestly saying to yourself, okay, I might have like this really different experience than the one I'm hoping for. Like, there's a really high degree of probability that some of the things I do not want in my birth will happen to me.
Yeah.
And the more you focus on repelling those things, the more you're going to draw them to you in some weird, freaky balancing of the universe. I don't understand what it is, but the longer I'm a doula, the more I see, the more you latch on to a specific idea of how you want your birth to be, and you do everything possible to achieve that vision, the more you sort of draw the other stuff towards
On the other hand, I say that I am especially careful with people who have a very strong feeling one way or another. However, I would say the majority of people who come to me say, oh, I don't have a preference. I just want everyone to be healthy and happy. And actually those are just as much of a, I don't mean red flag as in bad, but it just brings my attention up, because those people almost always have underlying preferences that they're not addressing, right?
Yeah. Well, that's
so I spend a lot of time taking them through processes to help them to find out what those preferences actually are, what their fears actually are, so that they can then meet them and look at them before they're faced with them in birth, because that can be a difficult time to suddenly do that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's super important too. What would you say is something that, what are some preconceived notions about doulas or doula work that are out there that, in the practicalness of being a doula, you're like, that's not really true?
Well, Usually I don't see, like, there's some things that I see in the general public that I don't see in people who are coming to look for a doula, right? So things in the general public, you see things like they think that we're doing illegal home births and things like that, right? Which there are some out there, not very many, but there are some
Mhm.
doulas out there who do that. But for the most part, no, that's not what we're doing. So most of the people who come to us looking for our services already know the basics. Now, let's see, as far as misconceptions amongst people who are coming to us, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Do you have one?
I'm not sure. Like sometimes people who are coming to us do have a preconceived notion that, there's a lot more homogeneity in terms of personality style or lifestyle that we all have.
Yes,
So
true. Yeah.
for myself,
Like hippie.
yeah, and I always call myself a bit of a hippie. Like I'm a hippie punk, right? I've got all this sort of like, I love things like gardening and love baking and doing things with my hand and trying to lead a simpler life, and like many hippies would identify with. But also I'm really punk rock in my core, because I also don't take, like I don't take anyone's rule just on the surface. I like to examine things and ask questions. I think, appropriately skeptical, but also at the same time, from having actual, like almost 2 decades of work under my belt, like I see what birth really looks like. I don't see idealized versions of birth. I see what actual birth looks like in so many permutations that I also realize how little I actually know.
I know. The more you attend, the more you realize, the more you answer the question, what do you think will happen if you answer all those questions with, well, it's kind of hard to say.
I know. And I find myself chatting with clients and saying, like, I'm sorry, I don't have any easy answer for you. Yeah. And in part, you're going to have to decide for yourselves. I can give you the following information and what I've observed. Which I always like, I can tell sometimes when clients are like let down, like, oh, just tell me what to do, or just give me the right answer. And I say, I'm sorry, I know this is frustrating. But yeah, like there's so much about birth that is unpredictable in odd ways, right? Like,
that's right.
Predict either. So like, it reminds me, when I was in university, I had this Friday morning, 9 a.m. Philosophy lecture. Worst timing ever, but gosh darn it, I went to every single one of those lectures. I loved them. It was about, like, I know usually in first year university, there's usually like 2 philosophy courses. There's like the one where it's you look at all the different philosophers, and the other one where you kind of look at what philosophy is and what the big ideas are behind it. And I remember one day, back then I used to smoke like a crazy rebel. So I remember between, in the break, because it was a 3-hour long lecture. So we'd take a break and we'd go outside, have a cigarette. And I was talking to this one fella. We stood and had cigarettes every day. Crazy that I think back on it now. But I remember he saying one morning, the more classes I go to, the less I actually know about anything. Like, because, when you talk about philosophy, you're talking about like the actual fabric of reality and what we think we know about it. And and I feel like that every time I go to a birth, I feel a bit of that in my heart. And I'm like, should I trust my instinct that this is happening, or should it, like, because sometimes that starts happening, but then something else completely different is going on.
Yeah, that's right.
So like, which is also weird, because part of my job is to help people understand what's happening and examine where they've come and where they're likely to go within their birth, so that they can feel more comfortable on the path to wherever they're going.
Yeah.
And yet ultimately,
it's tough. That's a tough thing to navigate. actually. It's
Yeah.
one of the most difficult things for sure about being a doula, I'd say.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think most people don't really realize how intense this work can get overall, which ends up leading to a lot of burnout in our field. You know, we've talked about the on-call thing, and we've talked about we touched a little bit on, you know, getting paid, the fact that it's a job and it's not easy, you know, to go to work all the time with low, inadequate compensation, right?
Yeah.
You know, ideally, every single person who worked would be able to have the compensation appropriate to the effort that they put out in their work.
Yeah.
And doulas put out an awful lot of effort, you know, from, you know, all the tiny things that we do to nurture the relationships that we have. You know, like today, I will talk with, you know, at least 3 of the, you know, the 6 or 7 clients who are due within the next 6 weeks.
And what people don't realize when you talk about, oh, I'm going to talk with 3 clients, they're like, okay, well, like, how long does that take? You're going to make 3 phone calls? Well, maybe each of those phone calls will take anywhere between half an hour and an hour, possibly. Like sometimes they're just 5-minute check-ins, all's well, but not necessarily. And it could very well be that whatever is happening for that person is unique somehow, or something that you don't know 100% about. So you're going to then go and look for some information to be able to send them. You've got to give good information. You're not just giving the first article that you find. You look for something that has solid evidence behind it. That all takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know,
literally
things
did
change.
that this morning. So, you know, the client asked like, hey, what's going on with this? You know, is there a policy change about this? And then can you tell me about this other thing? And so, you know, like we use chat, like a text-based chat as our non-emergency communication with our clients. So I will often be on my phone, you know, like chatting with my clients. And I've always got a teenager or a husband lurking around going like, I asked you a question. And I'm like, client. So, you know, like you're talking with them, but then you have to go, not just like, you look for information to verify what you're about to tell them, right? Because information changes all the time. So the other day, someone said, can I take Tylenol? And I'm like, let me just double check just in case, you know, the recommendations.
Something's changed. Yeah.
So I talk to some colleagues, I look up some information, then I can come back and I can say, not only can I say confidently, yeah, you should be fine to take Tylenol. I do recommend you check in with, you know, your midwife or your doctor in case you're feeling uncomfortable about taking that med. But also, here is an article that sort of explains, you know, the efficacy of this particular thing. And then again, this morning, a client was asking about postpartum binders and, you know, how soon after birth.
Do you want to, just 1 second, I'm going to interrupt you there. Most people don't know what that is. What's a postpartum binder?
A postpartum binder is something, it's almost like a girdle, and it can take the form of like an elasticized wrap
or a long cloth that you wrap around.
That gets bound up in the Ben King style, which is where it's sort of wrapped and knotted and wrapped and knotted. So
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Totally beautiful. Yeah.
We have them here and they're beautifully hand dyed fabric. So they look really nice when our clients use them. But yeah, so the client wanted to know, can I use this right away? And I thought, well, this is interesting because Canada and the United States have different recommendations for these sorts of things. So I had to go find out what the common recommendations were, if I could find Canadian sources for that. But then also, you know, saying like, you really should reach out to your midwife because she'll be able to tell you definitively, don't do this for like the first week, or don't do this for the first 2 weeks, or go ahead and start like the day you get home, whatever.
And it depends, something like that. It definitely depends on the client and what happens during their birth, right? So,
Exactly. And I can't make those calls. So, yeah, so there's a lot more than just like a 10-minute interaction with my client to say, yeah, sure, you should be fine to take some Tylenol. There's a lot more that goes into being able to do that. But then all that also takes me out of the workflow that I'm already within. Like maybe I'm setting up my week's social media, and then
right.
my client needs me, so I take my focus on that,
Yep.
and then move over here for a little while, and then I have to come and put my focus back, and then regain that focus.
Get back into your groove. Yeah.
For a couple of gals with some ADHD type stuff going on, that can sometimes be a little difficult. But like those are the kinds of things that are going on, and that's not just going on during the day. We often get, like little messages at 9 or 10 or even later at night.
Yeah.
I once got a wonderful postpartum client. She was a couple weeks after postpartum, and she messaged at about 1:30 in the morning and said, like, is anyone up right now that I can talk to immediately? And I said, I'm awake. So what's up? And she said, I'm going to send you a video. Tell me if this is okay. And she sent a video of her baby sleeping, but apparently he slept with his eyes open. And she was completely freaked out. She said, is he having a seizure?
That's a good question.
No. I said, no, this is like, he looks perfectly normal. He was doing all the normal facial expressions that a baby settling into sleep would do. It's just that his eyes were open. And of course, his pupils were like roaming around, which for first-time parents can be really
That's weird. Yeah. That's very interesting. So, I've never seen that actually. In over 375 births and more postpartum gigs, never seen that.
Yeah.
And you say it's not unusual.
No, it's not. Some babies just like have their eyelids open while they're sleeping.
Seen it. Huh. Yeah, I mean, I've seen like a little slit of eyelid open, just a little bit, but not like fully open.
Definitely, you could tell he was doing all the like I'm falling asleep things with his eyes were rolling, and his face was like twitching, smiles and stuff. And I was like, no, he looks good.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
that's really sweet.
It was sweet. I was like, your baby is sleeping.
Don't wake him up.
Yep. So what I think another thing that people do have a misconception about people that call us for support, or maybe they don't, is the amount of training and education that the average doula has or that is required to become a doula. I have a lot of people when I talk to them about that training, because often, in an interview situation, they want to know about our training, or they read an article online that says when you're interviewing a doula, you should ask.
Yeah, you should ask that. Yeah. They're like, I don't know why. You're answering me and I don't even know how to assess that. So.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people are completely freaked out that, it's most of them are a 20-ish hour in-person training, usually over 2 days. I mean, in the last 2 years, we've switched over to virtual trainings for most of our doula trainings. But I think people are like, oh, you mean anyone?
You really have to, if you're serious about it, you have to top it up yourself, and you have to be really determined to do that. Like to seek out the training that's going to really help your clients. So absolutely. When I first got trained, I trained with something that rhymes with Mona.
That's okay. You can say there's lots of different
and I was not that thrilled. I mean, it's basically just like a prenatal course, right? With a doula focus, right? Yeah. And that for me was just not enough. Like I came out of there thinking, well, sure, I could go and help somebody during a birth right now, but I need more. I need a lot more. So I took a 5-month part-time anatomy and physiology of birth course, and a 4-month, I think it was a 4-month extended professional breastfeeding course both at Douglas College, and they were amazing. And then from there, I just kept taking more and more every year of all kinds of things, loss and birth, and helping people who have experienced sexual trauma during their lives, that sort of thing. So there are a million different ways that you can become a better doula, and most of us take advantage of those. So that's really where you want to be asking. Like, if you're looking for a doula, don't just ask about what their initial training was. What's all the other stuff that they've done around that, and how do they keep themselves updated in terms of just keeping abreast of current policy, practice, research, all that stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because there's some people who they take their training and then they feel like they're done and they move on to start supporting people. But then, there's going to be gaps in your knowledge, and they may not realize that at first. It may take a couple of years for you to realize, what I thought about birth is very different than what it really
and that's going to happen no matter what you do, right? No matter what your training is, you're going to have many moments of, things are different than what I thought.
Sure. But it's funny, I think, I can remember one client fairly recently who was asking me, like, okay, so like, how many years of college does it take to become a doula? And I was like, none years. Like, and I think that in some ways, because the barrier to becoming a doula is incredibly low, and it often is predicated purely on money, right? If you can pay your, $600 to $1,000, whatever it might be, to get a training, then you can get into this business. And if you can't afford that, if you can't get those funds together all at once, or
you can do it anyway.
A program, with a payment plan, then you can do it anyway. But ultimately, if the training, so if you're going the route of training, then the barrier is fairly low in comparison to almost any other profession. But
however,
the ongoing gathering of information and education, if you're not doing that, then you're just like, I don't know.
Well, I think the other thing is
squeeze people's hips and stuff.
But you do, but if you do, okay, so say you come into the profession, you start working after training, and you don't really do anything else. I think you're going to find that you're not very happy with your work, right? Like, because you're not going to be that effective, probably. And I think maybe that's partly where the a high rate of attrition, because that's really the gate, right? The gate is the first year or two of practice.
Yes.
Right. So getting in, as long as you have the funds, super easy. First year or two of practice, that's when you see all kinds of doulas or would-be doulas saying, man, it's actually not for me. And that's to be expected, because it's not an easy profession in a lot of ways.
Not a lot of doulas last beyond 3 years. That's a known sort of figure. That 3 to 5 year zone is when most people burn out, because they're unprepared for the emotional intensity of what's happening, right? Because birth is incredibly emotionally intense. And if you are not good at removing yourself just a little bit, so that you don't become part of your client's emotional journey, or take on your client's emotional journey as your own, right? Like, it's really hard to not over-identify with your clients. And so if you start to over-identify with your clients, then anytime your client needs a medical intervention that they were hoping to avoid, will feel like a failure.
It's devastating.
The first time, before I realized that epidurals were really just a tool, one tool among many tools that people could use, and that in the grand scheme of things did not signal failure or a catastrophic end to breastfeeding success dreams or anything like that. That before I realized that, the first couple of times the client was like, oh, I want an epidural, felt like a massive failure to me. And like a giant jerk, part of me was like, oh, they gave up. Yeah. And I cannot, like, looking back, I'm horrified that I would ever have that kind of a thought within a birth space, that I would think that about other people, because now I know it's just simply not true. But there are a lot of doulas out there who do, when they hit those kinds of walls and they start to over-identify with their clients' dreams, then they just sort of double down and lean into that. And that ends up bringing them into really weird spaces too. So then we have doulas who sort of become radicalized in this strange way.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I the fact that you say in a strange way is important, because I don't have any problem with bringing politics into it, just not with my clients.
Yeah.
Right. I have strong views about how medicine is practiced around birth. And being involved in that, to me, is entirely appropriate. However, each person who comes to me to have me help with their birth, that person has a whole history that I don't know about. I try to learn as much as I can, but there's no way I'm ever going to know all the things. And there are things that they don't want me to know, right? And that's totally appropriate. And to honor that, I need to be very aware that I am operating with only a little slice of the pie, right? Like, there's this whole other part of their experience that I'll never know. And their decisions are based not just on the part of the pie that they're sharing with me, but on their whole experience. And I have had, like, in my early days, I had experiences like the one you're talking about. And it took me some time to come around to realizing how true that is, that they have their own experience. And you just have to honor that there's so much unknown.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, because of our unique position of knowing quite a lot about birth and knowing what goes on behind the curtain a little bit, as well as understanding what our clients are going through, things that our clients perceive of as traumatizing are overwhelmingly not intended to be malicious in any way. It's
That's
just
right. Yeah.
Like the care providers have this unique challenge of trying to care for the health of mom and baby, or birthing person and baby. And then the birthing person themselves is like, I have an entirely separate vision that is comprised of completely other things that my care providers, that's not even on their radar. And so, if a doctor, let's say, goes in and provides a vaginal exam that is felt by the birthing person as being very aggressive and very uncomfortable, like super uncomfortable or painful, it's very easy for that birthing person to walk away from their birth saying, the doctor was quite mean to me. And even though it said stop, like they were they were doing this vaginal exam that really hurt. And so I feel traumatized or assaulted by that experience. But the doctor
so even in a case, are you saying in a case where they said stop?
Well, so what I see is not necessarily people say stop. They're like, oh, like that hurts, right? And the doctor is like, or the midwife is just like, if you can just hang on for a moment, I'm like almost finding that information I'm looking for. And that little piece of information is going to help me understand where we go from here. And it also will prevent me from having to go back to look for that information a second time, which will potentially re-traumatize you, right? Like, so there are two different experiences that are happening within the birth space. And I think sometimes as doulas, when we over-identify with our clients' journeys, we can start to forget that the doctors are also like, have things that have to happen in order to guarantee the safety of their clients. Or
I have my own opinion on that, and that is that if I do believe in the bodily autonomy argument in that particular case. That's my take on it. I feel that when a client is saying, oh, it hurts, I really feel strongly that whoever the care provider is has to at least stop what they're doing. Like, not necessarily, like if they are doing a vaginal exam, at least stop what they're doing while they say whatever it is that they need to say about, I'm almost there. May I?
I think that's what I do observe. Like, I just want to say, like, I'm not seeing people like ignoring,
because I observe
comfort.
I definitely observe what I'm talking about happening. And it's really like with the care providers that I worked with. I'm not talking about the midwives so much, although even some midwives, but definitely a lot of the doctors. And that changed a lot near the end of my work in Vancouver.
Oh, yeah.
Things were changing as new doctors were coming in. They were really starting to understand the need for actual consent and not just acquiescence, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But a lot of the time, the doctors were just working with acquiescence, and it was not so great. So
no, you're right. You're absolutely right. But I think like what I'm envisioning, like what I'm thinking of, is usually like, you know, the clients are experiencing is really uncomfortable for them, and they're reacting to that, but they're still like they're consenting to the process. And like they know it's got to get done. They're committed to allowing it to happen. Anytime that I've seen my clients really struggle, I have seen the providers like stop.
Oh, that's so good.
Like, okay, like let's calm.
I'm glad that's the culture where you are. That's really good.
And I'm sure there are moments where that line is blurred and it's leans the other way sometimes, but the vast majority I see people like, okay, like I'm not in this to torture you. However, I do need to like get this particular bit of information. Like, you know, like if a woman is like got just a posterior lip or something happening or an anterior lip, and we just want to verify what's going on so that you can get going, pushing as soon as possible. Right. Sometimes the providers want that information, or they're like the hospital requires certain information in its paperwork and things like that. But I mean, and I'm focusing really on this vaginal exam thing, but this could be anything. It could be the decision to speed labor up a bit if we're seeing like really non-productive contractions for quite a prolonged period of time. And maybe we've tried a bunch of things already. But if you have a client who has an epidural, and then, you know, the providers are like, well, it shouldn't provide a lot of or any extra like pain sensations for you, which is usually a lot of people's problem when they're looking to augment a labor or something. Like if you don't have an epidural, it's going to make things more uncomfortable for you almost always. So, but there's all kinds of those options, like what are happening in birth, where clients are like, oh, and then the doctor did this and did that. And the doctor was really just following along with what was happening. Sometimes they're not good at communicating that.
That can be a big
and
problem.
That's where I can come in and
exactly that's where you and I can
like
do something to
let's
ease that
of how we got to this spot and where, like, what the couple of options branching out from this spot are, so that you can feel like not that there are these random things that happen to you. But that maybe, you know, like this thing that happened then sort of evolved into this thing. And that's why we're seeing this particular recommendation at this point in time. But but I think like there are a lot of doulas who can really, they take the, that idea that, I don't know, it's like the McDonald's, like the customer is always right. The client, I don't want to say that the client is always right, because the client's experiences are the client's experiences. And those
and I think it's less about right and wrong, and as you say, more about experience and what's happening in a given moment, and how it's more about communication rather than right or wrong, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So communicating for the client what they need, communicating for the caregiver what they need, and maybe we can be a bridge between that at times as well, when things maybe aren't being communicated so well.
I love that word bridge, because I see that as part of our role as well. I think a great doula bridges between the client and the provider and enhances that relationship.
That's right. Absolutely. It's not taking sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think if we start to say things like, your doctor said what? Then we start to say, you shouldn't trust your doctor, which, we apply the philosophical lens on it. Eventually that becomes a potentially very dangerous situation, right? If we extrapolate that down the line ad infinitum, then eventually the client just is like, I don't trust what the doctor is telling me, because my doula is telling me that the doctor shouldn't be saying this to me, or shouldn't. And again, like that slice of pie, we're also not getting a full history of our clients' medical stuff. And we also don't truly, when our client comes home from, say, an OB appointment and says, well, my doctor says I have to be induced next
You don't know what that wording was.
Exactly. Yeah. We don't know that the doctor said, if I don't see you this weekend, then we're going to talk about an induction on Tuesday, or based on a whole lot of other factors, this is probably a really prudent thing for us to do. The client just sort of hears
you must. Especially if they're afraid of it, right? Then it because they're reacting with emotion, and so the specifics can get lost. I do find that as well.
There's all kinds of, and birth is crazy. I've had clients who spent their entire pregnancies telling me how much they distrusted their midwife and didn't like her, and were considering asking for a different midwife to be in the room, and all kinds of things. And then being at the birth, and that client didn't want anyone except that midwife to touch her or speak to her. And
you never know. You just never know what's going to happen.
Act. But this crazy world of being a doula.
It is a crazy world of being a doula. I don't think we even got to. Did we do half the questions that we had?
What else? Let me have a look. If there's anything, let's see.
Or did we get to them all?
I think we did cover them all.
Well, that's pretty good then.
What's one of your absolute favorite things about being a doula?
Well, how about I give you a favorite memory?
Okay.
How's that?
Yes.
I had attended a birth of twins, and the parents were exhausted, as you can imagine, after directly after the birth. The parents were totally exhausted. They did get they were born by a cesarean birth.
Okay.
And they were so exhausted that I said, and I suggest this all the time, right? But people rarely take me up on it. I said, if you want to sleep, I can be here with your baby and make sure that they're feeling that closeness, that caring. If they need anything, I promise I will wake you up. They're like, okay. So they were totally into that. I set it up on the floor for obviously I tucked them in first. And then I set things up on the floor for myself. One baby under each arm. Oh my God. It's still one of the highlights of my life. It was so wonderful. It was just so wonderful. Yeah.
That sounds beautiful.
Pure bliss.
Oh.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. How about you?
I think one of my favorite memories is actually a funny memory that I actually share with a lot of clients and a lot of students in my classes. And it sort of illustrates a tiny bit how the difference between what the parent is experiencing and what the care provider knows and is experiencing. So this baby was born, and it was in a hospital. The decision was made by the parents to switch from home into hospital. Oh, it was because there was a weird skipped beat. The midwife was checking mom. She was around 5 centimeters and paper thin. And I thought, oh, I bet this baby, I said to myself, this baby will be in her arms in 3 hours. But I'm smart enough not to make those predictions out loud because sometimes they don't come true. I thought that baby with no, like completely effaced, that cervix is going to open up pretty quickly, I bet. Yeah. And the midwife was just listening to the baby's heartbeat after doing that initial vaginal exam. And we heard like a beat skipping, right? Mm-hmm. Like thump, 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 thump.
Yeah.
And the midwife said, did you hear that? I said, yeah, I heard that. And she listened a couple more times and she said, you know what? I just feel like, I don't know if it's the equipment or the baby's heart, but if the baby is skipping beats, then maybe we'd be safer in the hospital, because then if we ever needed staff to like come in a rush, they're right there for us. So mom was very happy to do that. She pushed her baby out literally on the nose. I looked
3
up.
hours?
Yes. She pushed the baby out. She delivered the placenta. She had her exam. And as soon as the exam, you know, like there's a postpartum exam where they look to make sure that there's whether there or not there are stitches needed and things like that. So as soon as all of that was happened and mom and baby were just sort of ready to relax, I sat down with my phone just to like give the parents a few minutes of very private time to get to know their new baby. And I took a well-needed break at that point from supporting them. And I kept hearing the baby would cry. And mom would go, I'd hear mom's voice. And of course, the whole time I just, you know, was like probably texting my husband or something, letting him know what was happening. And I hear mom's voice say, it's okay, baby. Mommy's right here. You're safe. You don't have to cry. And the baby would immediately stop crying. What a sweetheart. He would just like, every time she spoke to him, he would immediately stop crying. But then about 3 seconds later, he would start crying again. And I'd noticed, like, I looked up and the midwife did this like 3 times. He would cry. Mom would say, it's okay, sweetie. Mommy's here. Don't cry. And he'd stop. And then about 3 or 4 seconds later, the midwife would walk over and just rub his back vigorously to make him cry. Because she just wanted to make sure that all that amniotic fluid was involved. It's very, very normal and important for babies to do a little bit of crying in the immediate postpartum period. So they inflate their lungs nice and strong. They expel that amniotic fluid from their lungs, and everyone is super safe. It was just so funny because mom had no idea it was happening. And the midwife was very respectful. Like, she didn't want to say, don't do that, leave him to cry. Yeah. When I interrupted, she just very quietly came over and would like rub the baby's back, stimulating the baby in the appropriate way. Yeah. He would respond in the appropriate way, and mom would then soothe him back to quiet. So funny. One of my favorite sort of little funny, delightful moments that out of the hundreds of births.
Can I share one more?
Yes, please do.
This time when, there's this couple, they were so connected through like prenatally, through the labor, right through the pushing. I'm getting the order of things wrong. This was up to probably mid active labor. Okay. Super connected. And then things started to take a little bit of a turn. Heartbeat, there were irregularities, some concern, more doctors, more nurses, lots of people looking at each other, like lots of medical staff looking at each other, not as much at the parents. Okay. For those moments, there are always those moments where they have to just urgently figure out, is this something that needs immediate attention or not? So they're doing their thing amongst themselves. That's always a stressful time for the parents, right? And I mean, the woman who was in labor, she was obviously distracted somewhat from all of this. So she's still going through her stuff. I'm helping her there. Mm-hmm. Her husband is there helping her as well. But he, little by little, as this conversation between the medical professionals is going on, and then they're talking to the laboring woman, he starts to I can see him backing away and feeling less connected. And I was like, okay, this is not good, because he's going to need to be very connected in just a moment, like, especially because they're going to have to make a decision. So I thought, okay, how can I get him to help here in a way that is going to really make him feel connected? So it just came to me in a flash. Okay, I can see maybe he could try, going up to the belly and going, hello, baby. Hello, it's your daddy. And so I suggested that to him, and he totally took me up on it. It was the most amazing moment, because every time he did that, the irregularities in the heartbeat stopped.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it was an increased heart rate, right? Like a too much increased heart rate. And every time he went, hello, actually the way he did it, it was also very funny. It was almost like Darth Vader. He was like, hello, baby, it's your daddy. He was just missing the breathing. But it calmed that baby right down. So
that's so
yeah,
sweet.
it was pretty wonderful to see. Yeah.
Oh.
And it totally did break that spell for him, where he suddenly was feeling out of the orbit, right?
Yeah.
So that was lovely.
Yeah. Oh, what a great and creative suggestion.
Well, the thing with these great and creative suggestions is you never know if it's going to work for that person, right? Like,
true. Yeah.
Lots of those get thrown out lots of stuff you throw out to the wind. Some of it works and some of it doesn't. Yeah.
That's true. Well, thank you, Aimee, for
thank you too.
hanging out with us.
Yeah.
It's great just talking shop with you today.
Likewise. Yeah.
We could get back and share some maybe some birth stories.
That would be fun, eh?
Episode.
Yeah, that would be really fun. Let's do that.
Awesome. Okay, well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's an extra long episode, but I hope you appreciate this look behind the curtain and a little glimpse at what doula lives are like for your birth doula, or if you're considering becoming a birth doula, or maybe you are a birth doula and you're finding lots to identify with in this chat. Join us next week when I'm not sure what we'll be doing or talking about, but we'll be here Wednesday at noon, live on Facebook and YouTube. And so thanks. Oh, and grab the link for our newsletter. We put out a newsletter every couple of weeks to every month. It's been busy here this summer, so we haven't been as regular as usual, but we do include coupons and discount codes for our own businesses and our friends' businesses, as well as helpful information and awesome, helpful printables. So thanks for joining us here on Birth and Baby Talk, and we'll see you next time. Bye, folks.